Thank you for joining us for Matt and Bill's presentation, Tools of the Trade, Utilizing Assessments and Coaching for Organizational Success. The program will begin momentarily. Hello, and thank you for joining us for this virtual presentation. The program will be starting shortly. Just a reminder that your video and audio will remain off throughout the discussion. Please submit your questions at any time during the program by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. I will be reviewing and compiling your questions and answering them at the end. In addition, we encourage you to use the chat feature to communicate with the panelists and other attendees. At this time, I would like to introduce Matt Goff of Moraine Park Technical College and Bill Persinger of Lakeshore Technical College for their presentation, Tools of the Trade, Utilizing Assessments and Coaching for Organizational Success.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Bill Persinger. As Jenny had pointed out, my background is in industrial organizational psychology. I've worked for the college for approximately 7 years. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time out in industry. Certified in HR, also do DOT assessments for the Department of Transportation or the federal government. Also certified as an Employees Assistance Program professional. So with that, my portion of the presentation is going to be talking about utilizing assessments um, uh, that's going to help individuals, hire, promote, and identify skill gaps. But we're going to talk more about today is kind of the development side of things. And so I'm going to spend the first 15 minutes talking to you about what types of assessments you can utilize. And I actually am going to share assessments that I use or have used within the Lakeshore Technical College District. And then after that, Matt is going to take over and follow up with the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes talking about the coaching aspect and how to utilize those assessments and how we can upskill employees within your workforce. So let me see if I can share my screen. All right, I'm guessing everybody could see that. So title of the presentation is Tools of the Trade, Utilizing Assessments and Coaching for Organizational Success. And as I said, I'm going to cover the assessment aspect of it, and Matt from Moraine Park Technical College will cover the coaching for organizational success. All right, now if I can just get my slides to work. All right, so what we need to know how we're going to utilize assessments. Are we utilizing them for selection, promotion, or development? Um, there's a variety of different ways we can use assessments. For the selection aspect of it, we can hire new employees, managers, first line to mid-level, and we can align the talent with organizational needs. So from the promotional side of it, I'm helping employers hiring individuals from like a production 1 to a production 2 level, or even a tech 1 to tech 2 level. But we also can help as far as succession planning. And one of the assessments that we're not going to talk about today that's very good for succession planning is an assessment that helps about with critical thinking. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The last thing we're going to spend most of our time talking about today is development. How do we diagnose skill gaps, and that way we can lead to training and coaching that we need within the organization. But the first thing we need to do is, how do we go about that? Well, we have to really think about, and for many of you that might be on today and have an HR background, is you have to do a complete job analysis. You have to know which competencies that you're trying to look at. And job analysis is really the study of what job holders do on the job. And that's not only looking at those that are doing the job, but also looking at those individuals that have done the job in the past. And then we're also pulling in subject matter experts. That could be supervisors, managers, anybody that has direct knowledge with that particular job. And the way we go about doing that, as far as gathering this information, is conducting interviews with these individuals, finding out what the key competencies are that we need to measure. We can also do performance indicator surveys, and those surveys really are, um, you know, if we already have an idea what those competencies are, we can put those to paper. We can put a description to them. We can put them on a Likert scale, 1 to 7. Then we have people, the subject matter experts, as well as people doing that job, kind of rank those particular skills and abilities or competencies based on that job role. From there, then we get that job description put together, which most of us are familiar with. And then we confirm those duties or those KSAOs or knowledge, skills, abilities, and other things that are important for that position. So why do you do a job analysis? Well, basically it forms the basis for the assessment tools that I'm going to talk about next. And it also provides that legal defensibility we need, and then helps us get to the point of being able to provide that coaching and training that we're all looking to do. So there's many different methods of assessments. From an HR perspective, you're looking at interviews, you're looking at resumes, you're looking at, well, resumes, you're looking at, um, personal history of individuals. And you can do 360 multi-rater types of personal history information. Then you get into things such as assessment centers, where job simulation can be done, where the person is actually performing actual jobs and duties that they're going to have to do in that particular job role. We call that in-basket techniques. And there's also situational interviews that we can do. There's a number of job simulation assessments, and many of the assessments that I'm going to talk about next are actually online assessments. Probably about 95 to 98% of the assessments I do are going to be online assessments, in which I provide reports to the employer about the particular skill gaps or the information based on that assessment. But we're going to spend most of the time, or the rest of the time that I have, is going to be talking about written tests or inventories. So let's talk about the different assessments that can be used for coaching and training. I mean, this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are the ones I'm going to cover today. So you have knowledge skill tests. Knowledge skill tests are going to be basically covering competencies that are needed for a specific job. Then you have the personality tests, and those are going to be traits that people exhibit across various situations. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about leadership ability tests. And those are going to be, what are used by employers to identify an individual's ability to lead, manage, and even to direct others. So let's spend a little time and talk about these written tests. Now, again, as I mentioned, these are mini tests that I use and have used multiple times with local employers here in Manitowoc and Sheboygan counties. The first one we're going to talk about is the MEC test. That is a knowledge skill test. Now, your knowledge skill tests are tests that, like for the MEC test, you're assessing for hydraulics, pneumatics, pumps, piping, welding, rigging. So there's 8 knowledge skill areas in which we're going to test individuals on. The nice thing about these tests is they give percentile ranks or based on national norms. So we're not only getting percentile ranks based on the individual skill gaps or the individual knowledge skill areas, but we're also getting a comprehensive percentile rank in all these things. So you might ask, well, these are not all the competencies we need. within our particular job. Well, the nice thing about these assessments is that you can pull out certain knowledge skill areas that are not necessarily needed on that job description. So we put that off to the side and we can still utilize this information. The elect test is very similar. It tests, motors, print reading, schematics, power distribution. These are two popular tests just because employers, and maybe you're one of them, are having a hard time finding people with mechanical and electrical ability. Um, so a lot of companies are trying to look from within their organization to develop these individuals. And it's amazing that I found, over the years that there's been people working out in the warehouse that the employer had no clue that they had this type of skill and ability. Recently, I tested 31 individuals at a large company in Sheboygan on the elect test. 31 electricians that we ended up finding out that they had roughly 3 or 4 skill gaps. So then we were able to provide the coaching and the training that Matt's going to talk about next. There's another test that I'm not going to show on the screen, but it's called the main test, which is a very comprehensive 21 knowledge skill test for both mechanical and electrical. And so I have a number of companies that run that particular test because, again, having a tough time finding electrical and mechanical individuals. So what employers are trying to do is finding individuals that have both those or all of those skills. One thing that an employer will do, if you see over my right shoulder, is a standard timing machine. So they'll run that mechanical aptitude test to find out if the person has an aptitude. If they have an aptitude, then it means they can be trained. If they can be trained, if we now run these knowledge skill tests and we can determine where their skill gaps may be so that we can now upskill them through the coaching and training. Okay, so that's knowledge skill tests. And these tests typically are, I shouldn't say typically, they're proctored tests that usually take about 40 minutes. Now, the main test takes about 2 hours to take. That can be done at your local technical colleges as far as the proctoring go, or you can choose to proctor that at your own company through a link that's sent to your computer. The next thing we're going to talk about is personality inventories. Now, the ones where you see on the screen now are ones, again, that I commonly use here in our district. And personality assessments, basically, if you've done the research or you've looked at the research, they work off the big 5 competencies or the big 5 measures. That's conscientiousness, agreeableness, stability, openness, and extroversion. The other ones that you see on your screen are assessments that take on other measures or other competencies that a company might want to take a look at. The nice thing about what I do is I send companies usually 2 or 3 different options of assessments based on the job description, based on the conversations that we've had, so that they can make a determination of what competencies or measures they actually want to measure. These particular assessments are wonderful for individuals. So what Matt's going to talk about next on the coaching aspect is how to individually coach people based on how they do on these particular assessments. The next ones, which many of you are very familiar with, the Myers-Briggs, the StrengthsFinder, the DISC, are assessments that are more from a group or a team building aspect. So you're looking at, like recently, we just, last week, the DISC survey, we're running a leadership series through our workforce development department. And so the instructor or the coach is pulling in everybody's information and taking a look at how they best, relate to others and how they best accept information from other. So it's really kind of rolls out into communication and proper communication. So leadership ability. These again are assessments that I use quite extensively within our district. You get the leadership opinion questionnaire, the management development questionnaire, and the work personality index. These leadership ability types of tests are very good at helping identify, the different measures and competencies that a company is looking for. Again, I use these quite extensively. So if you want, please write these down so that you can look them up yourself and have discussions with your local technical colleges. So really, in conclusion, um, why do we use assessments? Because we can know who the people are and how to properly assess them, and more importantly, to be able to identify the growth opportunities with these individuals, which then allows us to be able to improve organizational functioning and productivity, which ultimately, from a company standpoint, is going to help reduce your costs and improve your bottom line. So that is what I have to share in my, about 12 to 15 minutes. So now I'm going to hand it over to Matt so he can talk about the coaching aspects and how to utilize assessments to help coach and upskill individuals within your workforce.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. As Bill said, my name is Matt. I am a leadership instructor at Moraine Park Technical College, and I was excited to do this presentation because the concepts of, or the tools of assessments, and then the concept of kind of sharing or coaching are very much tied together. They go hand in hand, as the one would say. And so I'm going to take over and talk over the concepts of coaching and how that works. And we're going to actually take it from the view, or 30,000-foot view, of how to build a culture of coaching, and then kind of dive down into how do we utilize some of the specific things and look at specific things of such as assessments and other formal trainings that individuals could use. So I first off want to just ask you to think about, for a second, take a moment and think about somebody in your life that was an influential coach. Bring somebody to mind. That could be somebody from high school or college athletics. It could be a son or daughter's coach. It could be a music instructor or a music teacher that you had, a past boss, mentor. And think of the words or characteristics that kind of come to mind. I think that's the easiest way to think about what is coaching and how it can be an extremely powerful tool in a manager's tool belt. And those people that we think of as influential coaches, their lessons that we learn from them stick with us for life. They are things that go on, and really stick with us, and we can really remember, vividly remember, those things that they did to help us grow and develop. And we want to try to use those same things and mimic some of those characteristics in the workplace as we work through, as we work to develop people and help them to grow. So just a few stats out there. Why is it so important? Why is coaching and this concept of coaching so important? So some pretty crazy stats here, but 80% of people who receive coaching report increased self-confidence, right? They believe more in themselves. 70% benefit from improved workplace performance, relationships, and effective communication skills. 86% of companies report that they recouped their investment on coaching and more. And so what they went through has been recouped by them. 80% or more of all critical work skills are acquired on the job. So this is, I am working right now and I need to learn while I'm working and continue to grow. So 80% or more of those skills come from that way, that place. Approximately 50% of non-performance problems in business occur because of lack of feedback. So how do we work to, coaching isn't just a one-time shot, right? It's a continual thought process and feedback to build people and develop people. And then 90% of US workers who received on-the-job coaching believe it to be an important developmental tool. So it's important. The things Bill mentioned are important. And then backing those things up with coaching are important to individual growth, and they're important to organizational performance and organizational success. Once again, a very powerful tool that one can use. So let's define it a little bit. Let's look at what it means. Managerial coaching is an ongoing series of actions, ongoing being a key word there, both formal and informal, planned and spontaneous. So these are things that help an individual or a manager to help develop and teach their employees, help them to learn and grow, and then expand both individuals, so themselves expand their employees, and organizational capacity. It is also, as I note there, something that is practiced. It's something that you can grow, just like leadership. The more you practice it, or a workout, the more you practice it, the better you get at it. Coaching is the same, and the more effective that you can become with it. So coaching defined a little bit more. Coaching is anything a leader does to develop their employee. So this could be those sorts of things that are, those could be these formal trainings, as we talked about, an assessment that goes into it. It could be a sidebar conversation. It could be a performance, somebody's struggling and working through. That is a potential coaching situation. It could be recognition, or it could be a reward as time comes on. Anytime that an individual, a manager or leader works to develop their employee, they are working to coach. Coaching is a strategic and intentional investment by both the organization and individual leader. So by that, I really mean that this is not just something that is a sidebar, hey, I'm going to try this out kind of a thing. This is I'm going to put some actual effort into this. I as the leader, I as the manager, want to put some thought and some intentionality into helping this individual grow, because I know that will help them grow, and I know that will help our organization perform better. And that also, research shows that when an individual is happier, they choose to work better and they choose to continue working. So even just from the standpoint of retention, this concept of developing your employees is very, very important. Coaching happens in everyday moments, right? These are things that you're walking past on the shop floor and you notice something going well or something not going well. That is a moment to talk. You hear somebody having a conversation. That is a moment to coach and to develop an individual. Finding the time, and once again, in a very strategic and intentional way, can happen regularly and ongoing in those everyday moments. And then coaching cements formal training and helps put that learning into action. So this is one of the things that when I think of the concept of how to build assessments around this concept of coaching. Coaching is something that we work through and do every day, right? It is something, if we want to be effective leaders, if we want to be effective managers, we are continually working to be a good coach. We think back to those characteristics that we want, that makes up a good coach, and we work at it every day. Um, we use tools such as the assessments, whether that's on hard skills, some of those technical skills that Bill mentioned, or things like leadership inventories or personality assessments, to really discuss and supplement what it is that we do within this time. The training or the assessment, that's they take the assessment, they go through, and we get a lot of insight into that. And coaching, what we do is we take that knowledge, both as an employee and now as a boss to employee, and work to implement it and develop and grow within that particular position. So a couple other things to define coaching. So three fundamental elements of coaching in my mind. First one, meaning make learning a priority in everyday situations. So learning needs to be built into work every day. This means that creating a work environment that values and encourages learning is important, right? We need to have a place that we are willing to and wanting to say, I want you to try new things. I want you to try and learn and grow on your own. This also includes being willing to let our employees fail, and letting them know that it is okay to struggle and to fail. We want them to work through and develop that. So creating a culture of learning, a culture of kind of development and growth is that's a tall order. That's something that you have to work at to make happen. And yet, if you want a culture of learning and a culture of coaching, that needs to be a big part of it. That concept of teaching and enabling others to learn needs to be a priority in your work. And it means that you as a leader have to have a good understanding of your people. How do they learn? How do they like information taken in? That one of the benefits of going and utilizing those assessments is it helps you to understand your employees, your people that you are leading, and work to individualize and the coaching strategy to that individual. So the second thing, celebrating problem solving and strategic thinking. So this is I think this is a harder thing for managers and leaders. Oftentimes, the traditional scope of a leader is you do a very, very good job in your work, right? And what happens when you do a good job, right? You get promoted. So all of a sudden, you are now working with and leading others that have been doing what you used to be, that are doing what you used to be doing. And so the automatic default when a problem comes up for somebody who already knows and has done a good job of what they're working through is they fix it. I think a lot of us would deem ourselves fixers, right? We go in and we fix the problem, and it keeps things moving effectively and efficiently. The problem with that, though, as you can imagine, is that now that when that same thing happens in the future, that employee does not know how to go through. So we want to, once again, allow our employees to explore how to fix things, not just go in and solve it for them right away, but let them struggle through, give them tips, help them work through the problems, and the strategic kind of critical thinking as they go through. Explore the root issues. What's the big reason that we are here, and the challenges. Allow them to figure those out through all the different soft skills, effective listening, and asking good questions, all sorts of that sort of thing. We want to serve as a sounding board for other different ways and approaches of doing things. We want to allow others to bounce ideas off of us, as we think through that. When we celebrate and ask them and encourage them to be innovative, that helps them to and our organization, once again, to continue to progress and move forward. It also helps deepen a person's awareness of current behavior, and drives it. It helps us to uncover some of their beliefs and some of the assumptions that employees might have. So as a leader, if we're encouraging them to problem solve and think for themselves and figure things out on their own, and helping them to do that rather than just jumping in there and fixing it, it helps us to, once again, understand what are some of their beliefs, some of their assumptions that they're making as an employee. And then last, we want to use feedback to drive learning. So we want to use feedback. Now, this is both developmental feedback, right? The feedback that needs to happen because they have individual needs to work and to get better. And then feedback that is more from the positive side. So we want to make sure we are utilizing this concept of feedback to really drive learning. So these are informal and formal times. They are allow us to reinforce skills and behaviors that we want to use. And it helps to really focus on, here is what we want to do. So we're utilizing coaching, this concept of coaching, and this tool of coaching within all the moments we're giving feedback, both positive when they're doing well, and some of the developmental times when they are working to be better in that case. So just some key points, some key things to remember and to think through. So coaching is now a core management function. Coaching is now something that you as a leader, that managers need to work on. They need to get better at. We are using things such as assessments and those sorts of things all the time. That has been a standard. Coaching is, how do we take that to the next level? It's not just a one-time thing, but we use this in our day-to-day. We use the learning that came in those formal trainings in the day-to-day to improve them as an individual and build their capabilities, and develop them within our organizations. Being an effective coach has a major impact on our organizations, our individuals, and our own credibility, right? As a leader, we are able to help all of our people when we individualize approaches, when we get better at coaching. We are able to develop our teams and ultimately lead to better performance, which is where our next point: target your coaching to those capabilities that contribute to individual, team, and organizational success. So what are those? You can't coach on everything, right? There are a million different things that we as leaders and as managers, as bosses, are working to do. So what are those key points? What are those things that we as a leader can say, this has the biggest impact? These are those things that have the biggest impact. And let's target our coaching, let's target our conversations towards that. I already said it needs to be intentional and needs to be strategic, which also means it is time consuming, right? Coaching is not just something that can be done and then it's a one and done and you move on, but it is a time consuming thing. So let's make sure that the time is being used effectively, and think through, what are those capabilities? What are those skills that really we want to focus on and coach people up, that will give us the best opportunity for growth and development, and organizational results. And then last, as I mentioned, in kind of the coupling of assessments and this concept of coaching, is utilizing those formal trainings and assessments in conjunction with coaching to cement and drive learning. So we want to utilize the things that Bill talked about, and there are so many out there, and he mentioned a lot of the really, really good ones. there's so much growth that comes from that one thing, but we don't want it to just stop there. We want to utilize that as a leader, utilize that as their manager, and say, all right, how is this going to impact our day to day, and then continue that conversation as we move forward. So that those are some of the key points that I would say within coaching. Um, I mentioned before, this is a skill. It's something that you work on and something that you can get better at. And it's not an easy thing either. It's not just a, hey, I wanna become a better coach. It takes time. It takes a lot of practice for you as an individual to get better at asking questions, not just jumping in there and fixing issues, and to really work to develop people. But if we want to build our individuals and build our organizations as much as we can, coaching is a great way, great tool to use in doing that. And that's what I have. So at this point, I will turn it back over, and we can pause for questions and answer anything that came up.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt and Bill. Our first question is, can you give more examples of on-the-job tests, which you said was more online tests? What skills are these for? For example, years ago, you could have a receptionist do a typing test. How do you do a test for graphic design skills such as InDesign and Photoshop?
I got to unmute myself, I guess. um, I have over 1,000 different assessments that are available to me through probably about 6 or 7 vendors that I use. And there's specific tests for HVAC, for welding, for sales, for HR. Um, so what I'm saying is I think there's probably assessments that exist for what you're talking about. So I would reach out to your local technical college and get a better idea of what they would have to offer for you. But there are assessments out there for those particular things. Now, sometimes, again, depending on what you're looking to measure, you can actually have multiple tests that will get at the same competency. So you may not have one test that tests for everything that you're looking for. I have some companies, like when I do apprenticeship testing with companies, and those tend to be more my paper pencil types of tests, I will run 5 or 6 different tests at one time over a course of a couple hours to be able to get at specifically what the company wants to measure, to make sure that that person has the knowledge, skills, and abilities and the competencies to be able to get into the appropriate apprenticeship role.
Thank you, Bill. And then this one came in the second half, so it might be a question for Matt. Are you aware of specific assessments for specific industries? For example, would an assessment for a salesperson of manufacturing products or one who sells a support service be two very different assessments because of the skills or style needed to succeed?
I'll let you start with this one, Bill, because it talks to specific, and then I can take it from my side too.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. Are you aware of specific assessments for specific industries? For example, would an assessment for a salesperson of manufacturing products or one who sells a support service be two very different assessments because of the skills or style needed?
Yes, there's a variety of different assessments for sales types of positions. And again, it comes back to me having a discussion with the employer to identify specifically what they're trying to measure. And believe it or not, we run an assessment here at LTC for our career coaches that deals with sales related competencies. And so we've picked out one assessment that works perfect for what we're trying to measure here. So again, it's part of having that dialogue with what exactly you're trying to measure. And we could find the assessments to be able to help measure that and do that.
One thing that I would add is in some of the assessments that Bill had mentioned, such as your personality ones, your discs, your strengths quest, while they are not specific to an industry, the learning that happens helps you to understand what are the things that you are good at. Let's take strengths for example. It helps you to say these are the things that I am good at. So trying to force myself to be this type of a person or to use this type of a skill isn't going to get me anywhere. Where I should be doing that same, looking for the same outcome, but utilizing this certain skill that I have, or the strength that I have, or if you're looking at MBTI, all the different conversations that could come from that. So I would also say those ones that are also those general leadership or general personality or skills assessments can also help if you have a wide range of employees, and they have differing needs that are more soft skill, or just understanding that rather than the specific competency based.
This next question kind of goes along with that one. It says assessments might show areas where an individual needs training. Are there proven practices to use assessments to evaluate whether the training is actually improving areas that might be considered personal tendencies?
Good question. That is a very good question. I don't think there's specific assessments that, I mean, your knowledge skills are going to basically tell you if the person has the competencies or the knowledge skills in that particular area. Boy, I think other than, doing, surveys to find out, if the learning has stuck is about the best way to be able to measure learning. Boy, I'm going to have to ponder that question a little bit more. Excellent question.
Yeah, it's one of those that's, when you think of things like training on communication, how do you necessarily assess that? Or if you learn, if you're a better extrovert or introvert, or, you're thinking about where you are, where you land in that, how does that impact your individual? But the only thing that I would say is there is a lot of research out there, and I know that's a word that sometimes is thrown out there, but there is a lot of research that talks about how just self-awareness alone makes you a better employee, makes you a better team member, makes you a better leader. And so even just kind of bettering your understanding of yourself, and then also your understanding of what others think of you, can help in that. Once again, research from a university standpoint, I don't know of an assessment either, Bill, that would look at specific how do we assess this, the learning there.
Okay, thank you. One of the next questions is how can leaders find time to coach?
Yeah, leaders are busy. They're busy people. One of the things that I would say as a suggestion or as a thought is this. I mentioned coaching doesn't have to be super formal, and I really think that this concept of coaching could be a 2-minute conversation that you pull an individual aside and reaffirm something that they're doing or make a quick correction. So this concept of coaching doesn't need to be, while it needs to be intentional and kind of strategic, doesn't need to be a long drawn out process. It really needs to be, if you want it to be something that you prioritize, then it needs to be consistent and do that. But it doesn't need to be a big, long conversation, where you're pulling in hour-long meetings to discuss. It can be, hey, I recognize that you did this, giving specific feedback on a particular thing. When somebody comes and asks you for help, saying, I would love to answer you, come back with a few suggestions and let's talk those over, rather than just answering questions. So it might just be questions back to the individual to help build their own learning and their own confidence in learning. That one thing that I would say with coaching is oftentimes it's not as much about the learning, but it's about giving the individual the confidence to make the decisions, and help them to learn in that way. So it doesn't need to be this big thing, but I 100% see that it is a time consuming thing, or could be. So it does need to be a priority if it's something that you want to, and it will take a little bit more time. In my mind, I think the payoff though is significant if you're able to do that, even in the small ways.
And then again, though, along those lines again, what do you recommend for a new coach replacing one that did a poor job?
So I'm wondering if that is in reference to replacing. So I think it's probably asking what a new person who came in and is replacing a coach who did a poor job, is what I think that's probably asking. So my thought would be, to really set the bar at where you want it. And once again, I think the concept of being consistent and saying, here's what my kind of my expectations are, and here is the role I am going to play in this, and laying that out for your employees is a great place to start as a new coach, and setting the kind of the expectation or what they can expect from you. But you also don't want to set that expectation and then all of a sudden you get busy and it goes away. So I think that a key thing as a new coach or a new employee who wants to come in and utilize this concept of a learning culture, a culture of development, that it is something you prioritize and you are consistent and consistently do. People will make assumptions of what it will look like, and what that from their previous coach. And so if you can start out in the right way and then stay consistent, I think that will change how they kind of viewed things. Good question.
All right, we have a couple more yet. Even in a COVID-affected economy, are companies still struggling to find workers with the right skills and then don't need to test other employees to see if they have the right skills?
I mean, this COVID environment has really changed a lot of things for people. And most employers are struggling to find skilled laborers. And of course, we've got the furloughs and we got the layoffs that are occurring right now. I mean, it is a tough situation. I don't know, Matt, do you have something more to share with that?
Yeah, it is, we're all, I think everybody, regardless of whether we go into wherever I'm teaching, this is something that they are working through. How do we find the right people in these, and then how do we see who has the right skills? And I think that the example that Bill shared in his, I think it was the ELECT test that you talked about, how you put together an assessment, and all of a sudden skills and knowledge that you never knew or never thought somebody might have, it comes to light. And so somebody who you would never have had on your radar, becomes all of a sudden somebody that you can utilize. And so while there is this search for people, I think it makes this concept of assessments and formal training and coaching all the more important, because you find these people who have these, competencies or abilities, or even just leadership skills, things that you would not have necessarily seen. It brings those to the surface, and it helps you to really drive, within who you have, drive some of those conversations. I would also say, in this COVID environment, when you're struggling to find people with the right skills, those that you do have, these conversations, whether it's coaching or just the assessments, and the training in general, is essential to help those people get better. They need to also learn more about who they are in order to lead others. And so those that have the lack of skills as they go through things. And so not only those that don't have the right skills, but those that do have the right skills, how are we developing them and working with them to be better? So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that's where my mind goes.
Yeah, and from a development standpoint, as Matt had mentioned, I have a number of companies that, again, they're struggling to find people, and they don't know that they have excellent skilled individuals in their workforce. There was one company that called me down in Sheboygan that said, "Hey, I have a position, a high-level maintenance position I need to fill, and I have 7 internal people that have applied for the position. Can you please come down and assess these individuals?" Well, lo and behold, the person who did the best on a particular assessment I ran, which was a standard timing machine, which is a mechanical aptitude test, was a guy that worked out in the warehouse. Okay, they had no clue. And as I asked this guy, I said, "Well, where did you get all these skills? Is this something that you learned? Did you go to school for?" He says, "No, I grew up in a salvage yard, and this is what I did. My dad would send me out and take off parts, and I'd have to come back with them." So it is amazing to me, how many skilled people already work within an organization that are untapped resources for people. The gentleman I just assessed yesterday, again for a different company down in Sheboygan, he wanted to be promoted. So we ran the standard time machine on him, and it turns out he scored in the 75th percentile. Well, if you score above the 40th percentile, you're said to have good mechanical aptitude and can be trained to do anything. Okay, this guy got 4 out of 4, and he solved them 3 out of 4 on the first attempt. What a gem! What a diamond in the rough that now this company can choose to send to school or run another test to find out where the skill gaps exist. Now send them to school, or through coaching, through seminars, or through contract training, and now upskill this person. And most of you have education programs, so you have them sign on the dotted line for 2 or 3 years that they're going to stay within the organization. And now you have a resource out for a number of years, and you have someone that has great morale and has become now a part of your company culture.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that answer, Bill and Matt. We do have time for one more question that I believe both of you could speak to. What is the best advice you would give employers regarding who in your organization should be involved in training?
Everyone. I think, again, I come from the assessment side of things. And so it's my job to identify where those skill gaps exist within an individual. And no one's perfect. Everybody has gaps that can be filled. It depends, from the company's perspective, how many resources you want to put into that. Right now is a great time to do that, as the economy tends to be more in a holding pattern than any time we've known in how many years. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, at least in my side of things, to do assessments, to determine where those skill gaps, those training needs may be. I mean, you have your basic things in public safety kind of things that you have to do on an annual basis, but there's other things. I mean, this is a time to coach, your leaders. I mean, what's the number one reason that people leave companies? It's their supervisor. We know that. Again, bringing the research out again. So we know that is the case. So do we have leaders in the right spots or right places? A part of doing assessments is determining where those skill gaps might be, and then bringing in an expert like Matt to be able to coach and to get that person so that when the next employee is hired, they're able to talk the right language, and they're going to be respected in the position that they have, and maybe now we're able to retain that person a little bit longer. I guess that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, great thoughts, Bill. Two different things kind of come to mind. One, when you kind of think of this concept of training, is that if you can get buy-in from the top, I think that's pretty important. If you can get buy-in from those that you need to say, yeah, we want to make this investment not only in the training, to get the contract, but we want to make this investment in developing our people. Kind of that human side of helping our people to be better at the job they're doing now and the job that they may do with us in 5, 10, 15 years, or they may do someplace else, right? And so I think that's a big part of this concept of training. So if you can get buy-in, that's great. I also think that those individuals that are doing the job day to day, especially when you think about more of the hard skill training and some of those things, what are those skill gaps that they are seeing in the people that are coming out that are not there? And so getting their buy-in, even if it's just sitting down and saying, we're looking at getting some training from outside, from LTC, from MPTC. What are some areas that you senior team members see as areas of growth? And so I think getting buy-in, I've seen a lot of development happen that way. I also think that engagement from them helps them to see that this is also something that I could be working on and continuing to grow in that way. So two just kind of separate thoughts come to mind. I think that there's differing levels. Anytime you make this, one of the trainings that I talk, or one of the classes I teach, we talk about moments where you're making a transition, and how important this concept of training or development is in those when you're moving from one position to another, and one from a ground floor person to a leader of people, and all of those things. I think when you're talking about who should be getting involved, looking at those key moments, and then deciding from that point, all right, who do we want involved in making the decisions to do this, is also a good way to discuss and discover who should be involved in the training. Good question.
Okay, well, that is all the time we have, and we did get through all the questions. So thank you, Matt and Bill, for your time today. And thank you to everybody who attended. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.